All right, so let me just say before we get into this, this was linked to me by Tube. The original interview is in French. I don't have a clue how to read French or even understand it, so we've translated directly. There could be massive translation issues within this. I have no idea what the actual French is because I don't speak French. But apparently this is a very good interview. We're gonna go through it. This is the first time that I'm seeing it, along with chat. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it means we didn't do another take of it because we were happy with this one. So there we go. WoW Shadowlands exclusive interview with Steve Danuser about Maldraxxus. On Tuesday, September 15, 2020, we got to interview Steve Danuser, World of Warcraft Shadowlands lead narrative designer, about the Maldraxxus area. Several topics were discussed: the role of Draka, the design of the area, Kalthazard, the primate, or the Primus, I'm assuming, and many others. On Tuesday, September 15, Millennial.gg had the chance to honor to interview Steve Danuser, World of Warcraft lead designer, narrative designer, about one of the areas of Shadowlands expansion, Maldraxxus, in European exclusivity. Several axes could be explored. Alright, so we're going to go down. Link between Draka and the Legion in the series The Eternities, or The Eternals, I'm assuming. This scene was meant to show how the cosmic forces of Warcraft, of the Warcraft universe, somehow fight against each other. Alright, so this is, first and foremost, there's something massive about this line. This scene was meant to show how the cosmic forces of the Warcraft universe somehow fight against each other. We have said this multiple times before. We have explained this multiple times before, that the Shadowlands, or the cosmological forces of World of Warcraft, the cosmology map that hopefully Alex will have on the screen, right? That cosmology map shows enemies of the Great Beyond. The Great Beyond sits in the middle, it's reality, and all of the cosmological forces around it seems to be its enemies. So the Legion is an army that fits into disorder. If you look at the cosmology, whoa, so the Legion's army, all right, cosmology, while Maldraxxus is that unchanging army that protects the realm from the dead. This task is partly defensive. If the Legion, the Void, or any force were to invade the Shadowlands, Maldraxxus would react. But you also have to be proactive. So this scene was an excursion by Maldraxxus forces to try and get some intelligence before the Legion acted first. There is therefore a back and forth between these great cosmic forces that are perpetuated through the ages. Details that were not included in the stories of Mortals and Azeroth, these conflicts have taken place in the cosmos since time immemorial, I believe is the word there. Since time immemorial. So basically since the advent of time, since the beginning of time, this is where things sort of started. And these cosmological forces, remember, we have this exact same quote pretty much from Xal'atath. Xal'atath asks us if the Draenei know about the ones that came before.
Oh my god!
Right? If the Draenei have any idea about the eternal war that has been fought, that this war is far older than even they can guess. Now, if that is true, we have to understand the Draenei is ridiculously old. So if this war is even older than the Draenei, then it truly tells us how long the cosmic forces have been busy. And Xal'atath's whisper here gives us maybe even a little bit more insight into this. The reason I say more is, why has there been others before the Draenei? Could it be that every single time, so basically look at it as an Ouroboros, right? If you look at it as an Ouroboros, not Ouroboros, what's the snake, the eternal snake, the snake that eats its own tail? Ouroboros, thank you very much. Yes, Ouroboros. If you look at it as Ouroboros, in other words, an eternity, the eternal struggle, if you will, then could it be that the cosmological forces, based on the whisper from Xal'atath, right, that these cosmological forces have effectively destroyed reality and then rebuild it, and then they destroy it and then they rebuild it? So every single time this war literally ends to pretty much the extermination of everything, and then everything has to restart. This would give even more credence to the idea that someone should put a stop to this, that someone should end this. All right, so but you have to also be proactive. So it is quite interesting that they first and foremost explain that the Maldraxxian army is supposed to be defensive, so it's not actually meant to attack, but they have had instances where they do attack, where they do go on the offensive. But again, something that's very interesting to me when it comes to the Shadowlands is how all of the other cosmological forces seem very much hellbent on some kind of outer conquering. So they want to conquer whatever is outside of them. Whereas the Shadowlands, all of the eternal ones within the Shadowlands seems very happy to just be on the inside. They just look after themselves, and they just look after their own goals. They don't really include themselves or insert themselves into the greater conflicts. All right, so relationship between cosmic forces. Since the dawn of time, yes, if you look at these great magical forces represented on the periphery of cosmology, think that each is trying to expand its influence. Each wishes to be the strongest. I have said this multiple times. We have discussed this in channel. You guys have alluded to this before. That's literally what they try to do. They want to be the ruler. In a way, they are jealous and fearful of the other forces. That's why Sargeras had changed, because of his fear of the void, of what they might do. So he married foul magic and disorder. With one titan of the order, he became this powerful entity of the disorder. So he basically, again, we know this is in the lore. This is why Sargeras was able to destroy his brothers, the other titans, so easily, because the merging of order with foul, with disorder, creates something far more powerful. And we also know that titans have a distinct weakness to foul. It's innate to them. They have a weakness to foul magic. And I would say that over time, each of these forces has in turn gained and lost in influence. Sometimes some of them would ally themselves against another, which would gain too much importance. So the universe tries to tend towards a certain balance, but at the same time, each one tries to advance its own interests. So again, remember when we discussed what is happening within the Shadowlands right now? I told you guys that the Shadowlands doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, there's a number of things in the Shadowlands right now that just does not make sense. There seems to be some kind of life influence. There seems to be some kind of light influence within the Shadowlands. And we pretty much have it here. Steve Danuser pretty much says it. And I would say that over time, each of these powers has in turn gained and lost in influence. Sometimes, some of them would ally themselves against another, which would gain too much importance. So they are capable of allying themselves in order to further their own advances. So there's a back and forth between these forces, and stuck in the middle, mortal realms like Azeroth and other worlds, again leading to what Sylvana said at the end of Shadows Rising. Explanation of the Shadowlands loading screen. No, the loading screen was intended only to be a visual composition, so this answers that. We all asked this. I remember when we saw this loading screen for the first time, chat was freaking out, going, Craxus on the side of the jailer? What the fuck's going on? Why is Craxus on the side of the jailer? This makes no sense. So here we have it, right? The loading screen was intended only to be a visual composition. It was not intended to say which side was each character depicted. Craxus represents the armed forces of Maldraxxus at the moment because of the Primus, who is one of the Eternal ones, one of the Eternals has been gone for a long time now. So it was only an artistic choice regarding the loading screen. It was not meant to indicate that the good guys are dying one side and the bad guys are on the other. Just creating a visually interesting piece. It's good that Blizzard is at least doing that, because I was convinced that this was showing us something more. So I'm glad I'm reading this article now. Origin and the conception of Maldraxxus and its role. Yes, we discussed as we developed the expansion about what the different roles of each of the areas we would be visiting would be. So we talked about the different themes that we wanted to explore both visually and narratively, discussed the multiple implications of death that the Warcraft universe has explored before, and one of them was the Scourge, as players may have seen it in Warcraft 3 and the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. Maldraxxus has very distinctive visual concepts compared to other areas, and we wanted to show where some of them came from. What would be the higher form of the Scourge that we were able to fight in Azeroth? And as we discussed this, remembering the Scourge in Azeroth as that mighty and unstoppable army that was used by both the Lich King and the Legion in different ways, we reflected on what purpose it might serve in Shadowlands. We sided with the idea that instead of just being this aggressive force that we saw with the Scourge, there could be this inherently defensive force whose primary role is to defend the Shadowlands. So an interesting little thing here, he is basically, so this is now the third time that Blizzard have flip-flopped on this idea. The first time Blizzard came out and said, yes, the Scourge was marketed on Maldraxxus, and that the powers of the Lich King come from Maldraxxus. Then Blizzard flip-flopped and said, no, actually the Lich King's power comes from the Jailer. This is where his power originated from. We also saw that in the Bastion cinematic, that the powers of the Lich King do come from the Jailer. Now Steve Danuser is once again alluding to the fact that the power of the Scourge really does draw from Maldraxxus. I believe the reason for this is it's both. So one might argue that at one point or another, the Jailer was in fact in control of Maldraxxus. Before he was banished, he was the leader of the Shadowlands army. And this might give us even more insights into why exactly he was banished, which we could discuss on Sunday. And it is really where this idea first came to us. Thus, we wanted to marry the very monstrous and frightening visual aspects of the beings living in this realm, the abominations, the constructions, the liches, the necromancers, and the skeleton warriors, for example, with a strong sense of nobility and duty in the culture of Maldraxxus. And these things just look horrific. These things are a little bit scary because they've got a shit ton of health, especially while you're leveling up, and they just look eerie and weird. It makes for interesting stories to be written. You know, your first impression tells you something from what you see with your eyes, but as you delve deeper into Maldraxxus' story, you discover something deeper, which resonates with you. It allows certain iconic characters such as Draka, who was very noble during her lifetime, to bring her nobility to the role that Maldraxxus has. Saurfang in Maldraxxus. Keep in mind the chain of events. What happens to souls in Battle for Azeroth as Sylvanas' actions cause more and more deaths, causing war and chaos on Azeroth. Those souls are being poured out into the Maw. Many brave and noble people died during the events of Battle for Azeroth, and those souls were sucked into the Maw. They say the Den, I'm sure it's the Maw. This is one of the reasons we are trying to stop the Jailer at max level. Certain tasks send us to the lair to try and relieve as many souls as possible. That being said, we won't be able to meet everyone who died in the war, but we certainly considered several characters that we could include in the story. So I'm not saying that we will never get to see Saurfang, but we felt his story arc had been satisfactory during Battle for Azeroth, and we didn't feel the need to make it a big part of the history of Shadowlands. I know there might be people who disagree with this, but personally, I think the Old Soldier cinematic told us what Saurfang really wanted, right? It told us that Saurfang really wanted to die. It was his hope. His dream was to have that honorable death. And in the end, that's exactly what he got. Now, the fact that he's in the Maw, we will most likely save him through our actions anyway in the Shadowlands, which means that Blizzard doesn't have to make a big deal of it. He could maybe feature somewhere in patch 9.2, 9.3, where we finally get to save some of the souls and he could go, you know, to Bastion or to Maldraxxus or wherever the fuck they want to send him. Character travel between areas of the Shadowlands. Just before the players arrived in Shadowlands, all realms faced a period of scarcity. The anima is greatly reduced. The flow of new souls arriving in Shadowlands is sucked directly into the Maw. Each kingdom is therefore in a way isolated, cut off from the others. They are all sorely lacking in resources in a palpable way, and this really is shown throughout all of the zones of the Shadowlands. Those of you who've watched me level through it, and those of you who've had a chance to actually play it, it's very clear that the Shadowlands zones are suffering at the moment. This scarcity gave rise to the doubt and chaos that divided the Shadowlands. As unfettered individuals able to come and go in the Shadowlands, one of the things we players do is reconnect some of the bonds between the different realms. We bring back anima, we collect it, give it to those congregations to which we are committed. We thus restore some of the forces. If we see the launch of Shadowlands as the first act in the story, part of our job in Act 1 is to develop the narrative arc of each of the congregations. That's why we make a choice. We give our allegiance to one of them because we can't make them all strong. It takes a lot of players to do that throughout the expansion. Later, there will come a time when the congregations will have to come together, but this is something that will be developed throughout history. So far, we see them individually. If at some point the congregations have to come together, that gives us a rather interesting little view into what Blizzard's ultimate player arc could be. The reason why Blizzard is so insistent on us not getting a choice as to the different soul binds, but rather we choose a covenant and then we are stuck with this covenant. If Steve Danuser is correct here, and at some point the different congregations or covenants will come together, then that's perhaps what Blizzard is building to. So in 9.2, when the covenants finally do come together, you will have an opening up of the soulbinds, which means that you will feel actively growing in power as you go through the Shadowlands. I'm not saying that's exactly why, but maybe that's why Blizzard have been so insistent on not providing us player power choice or freedom of player power from the Covenant system. Perhaps, right? Don't know. We find throughout the history that we begin to bring some of these people through these passages. At the beginning of Erebos, for example, the lack of resources, there are few people there other than the servants and the merchants. Over time, you will find that more members of the Covenant start to arrive. When you do the Covenant campaigns, you do certain quest lines where some members of the Covenants become able to go to the Maw just like you. You become able to bring characters with you and bring them out of this desolate place, which again is something that we don't have an answer to. Hopefully they asked them and hopefully he fucking answered it. It is therefore really thanks to the efforts of the players that some of these links are restored. That said, some of the bad guys in the story have not lacked anima. They have amassed some of these resources and they have been able to develop partnerships to take advantage of certain back roads and have their own means to travel through the Shadowlands. We will also learn about these intrigues throughout the history of Shadowlands. This is very much proven in the story of Revendreth. Siden Athreus is sitting on a crazy amount of anima. He does not have a shortage of it at all, and he's pouring all of that shit straight into the Maw. Future of Kalthazard. I think if you've been on the Maldraxxus campaign, you may have noticed a lot of echoes relating to Azeroth's past, and especially to the shadow that Kalthazard casts and all the things that he was able to do on Azeroth to facilitate the advent of the Lich King and the onslaught the Scourge inflicted on the world. Exploring the repercussions of these actions and the stories associated with them will be part of the fun that will flow from the adventure in Maldraxxus. Reasons for the attack on the House of Rituals and the assemblies on Bastion. So this doesn't give us, I just want to say on the Kalthazard thing, I mean, he really doesn't give a lot away, right, when it comes to Kalthazard, which is sort of lame in a way, because I would have loved to know a little bit more about Kalthazard, even if he just wanted to drop a little spicy hint as to why in the hell Kalthazard is inside the Shadowlands, when, according to the lore, his phylactery was not destroyed. Reason for the attack on the House of Rituals and the assemblies on Bastion. The House of Assemblies and Rituals have formed a coalition to act against the will of the Primus, this leader who has been missing for some time. It is the absence of the Primus that the links between the five houses of Maldraxxus began to shatter. Maldraxxus was a place of fighting. The Primus considered that to have the strongest soldiers, it was necessary to put the best in competition. When he was there, it was done through war games, gladiatorial fights, that sort of thing. In his absence, the political intrigue between the various houses has caused them to turn on each other and initiated the dire situation we see Maldraxxus in when we get there. Part of the mystery when we explore all of this is the why behind this attack on Bastion. Since Maldraxxus is supposed to defend the Shadowlands and not attack it. So the Maldraxxus actually do something very evil. You'll learn this towards the end of the questing experience within Maldraxxus, but they've actually taken Bastion souls and merged them into one big abomination. So the Bastion souls have been forced into a Maldraxxus abomination, and they're going to use the powers of these Bastion souls to build like a super abomination. It's crazy, the shit that they do there. So I don't want to give spoilers for those who have not yet browsed this content, but by playing these quests, you will learn why these two houses of Maldraxxus have allied against each other and against Bastion. On balance, it really is about creating maximum chaos, mistrust, and animosity between these realms, and Kel'Thuzad would most likely be at the center of this. Link between the Primus and the Rune Carver. The Primus has been gone for a very long time. We learn a few things about him as we go through the Maldraxxus questline. We know he has a very thoughtful individual when it came to tactics, military. He was in a way a military genius among the Eternals who make up this pantheon of death. The Primus was the one who thought the longest, the one who tried to anticipate dangers before they arose. But even he began to realize that he might have underestimated the jailer, that imprisoning him for so long might not be as safe as he had imagined for a while. Interesting. Interesting indeed. This is most likely why Syed Anathrius has finally joined the jailer, because as he says here, even the Primus started to realize that the imprisonment of the jailer for so long was definitely not a good thing. But now it became clear to him that it wasn't. It wasn't as sure as he had imagined. So he left to investigate this, and now we can only speculate what happened to him. The Primus was also known to have great knowledge. He had many apprentices to whom he taught. Moreover, we meet one of them in Maldraxxus who help us to create a weapon on the spot, and some of this knowledge could well have fallen into the hands of other entities of the Shadowlands as well. So Steve Danuser is legitimately not answering this question. I still maintain that the Primus and the Rune Carver is the same thing. I genuinely believe that it is exactly the same thing. But we won't know until we actually see it, right? We won't know until we get actually some information on this. But in my opinion, Steve Danuser being as tight-lipped on it tells me it might actually be the problem. Future of the dead in Shadowlands. Death being very relative, especially since we are in the realms of dead. Will we ever see characters like Margrave Akarek and Stradama again? No. Those characters are gone. You have to remember that in Shadowlands, there is no such thing as a Shadowlands of the Shadow. There is no place to go after the death in Shadowlands, so the stakes are real in this world. Oh shit. So the stakes are real in this world. As we said already, this is pretty crazy. We've seen what happens when we fight demons on Azeroth and kill them. Their essence returns to the Twisting Nether and they are recreated. If you go to the Twisting Nether and kill a demon there, then it actually dies for good. And it is the same for the souls and the creatures present in the realm of death, issued from the magic of death. What is interesting to me is that both the Twisting Nether and the realms of dead have the exact same thing. Could we then also argue that every single other cosmological force have the exact same thing? At least that's what I think. So if someone like one of these Margraves is destroyed, he disappears. His energy scatters and joins the great whole of death magic, but as an entity, he no longer exists. The same goes for souls, and this is one of the simulacra taking place right now, as all souls are being sent to the maw, and the jailer selects many of them for the sole purpose of shred them in order to fashion weapons, for example. This is a real threat to our loved ones, and it is one of the reasons that drives us, the residents of Azeroth, to seek to stop the pangs to which the jailer lends itself. So, interesting that we didn't actually know that that's what the jailer is doing, but that is, again, pretty insane. So one of the reasons we need to stop the jailer is exactly this. He uses our souls, much like the Maldraxxus did to the Bastion soldiers, using the souls to forge weapons, which begs the question, whose soul made Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination? If we are to believe that it is souls themselves that's being used to make weapons, whose soul actually made Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination? And could it be that Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination has a much darker history than we even knew about? Identity of the mysterious ally of the Primus. In the document you shared with us, you mentioned a mysterious ally who showed the Primus infinity of timelines and helped him become even more proficient. We know that these powers are used by arcane beings like Aman'Thul or by entities related to the Void. Does this ally fall into one of these categories, or is he something completely different? I genuinely don't know. Alright, so interesting, the document that he's talking about, we didn't see that. You know? Oh my God! I mean, I'm pretty sure we did not see this. I didn't see this document. The ally that the Primus has. So I'm guessing this document is for the media themselves. You know, the Shadowlands are filled with multiple legends and mysteries. There is a story that the Primus encountered a certain entity that helped him observe the timelines in order to contemplate the same battles over and over again. Again with some differences, so that the Primus can learn the effect that each tactic would have on the battles he leads and his combat strategy. This is just one of these stories, one of those stories referring to the legendary nature of the Primus and his mastery of military tactics. Who was this entity? Were these several entities with whom he would have allied? Who could have helped him and with whom he exchanged something in exchange for this knowledge? This is one of those long mysteries that you might one day explore. But I don't think the Primus wants to share this information and reveal the identity of these allies. Could Odin be one of these allies? I don't know, but this is going to take some thinking. We're going to have to figure this shit out. In order to prepare for our interview, we had access to an exclusive document telling us the story of Maldraxxus. In it, we discovered a passage that mentions the existence of a mysterious ally of the Primus who would have helped him to contemplate the timelines in order to perfect his military tactics, which we have translated into French. The fulfillment of Maldraxxus' duty is controlled by the Primus, the best and most cunning tactician among the Eternals who rule the realms of the dead. He has led his army in countless battles against rival forces in the cosmos, fending off the Burning Legion, the armies of the Void Lords, and many more. He told himself that the Primus had found an ally capable of showing him the time paths in their infinity, which he used to observe the same battle over and over again across different realities. He noted how the slightest differences in strategy and deployment of the troops could shift the advantage to one side or the other. After centuries of careful observation, the Primus can instantly take stock of any situation and determine which path is most likely to bring him victory. We don't know who this is, but I have a feeling that one of the allies that the jailer or that the Primus may have actually aligned himself with might be Odin. Alexandros Mograine, Fatebringer, and his son Renault Mograine. We have learned that the skull of Alexandros Mograine's sword was not from Maldraxxus, insofar as his own son, Renault, played a major role in his death. Did Alexandros recover his skull to keep a relic of this betrayal? I think it's necessary to see in Fatebringer's story whether it's a literal skull or a metaphorical skull. No doubt fans are speculating greatly on this, especially with the death of his son having betrayed him. Maybe this story will be told in the future. Who knows? I fucking hate when you do this to me, Blizzard. Give answers, not more questions. Just give me answers. Alright, so that's the end of the interview. I do want to say a few key things that we learned here, right? A few key things that we learned here. First and foremost, the Primus is very much questioning the way in which they dealt with the jailer, which could give us even more reasons to see why Syed and Athreus ultimately turned against his brothers, the other Eternal Ones, and joined the jailer. Syed and Athreus may have in fact seen the exact same thing. He saw what it took the Primus longer to see. It is that if they keep their brother locked inside the maw, then this will be the end of them. They can't do this forever because the hatred within their brother will continuously grow. There's nothing they can do about that. On Sunday, I'm going to give you guys a speculation theory on what I think the maw actually is and why this might be so dangerous, why you don't want someone locked in the maw for too long, but we'll get into that on Sunday. For now, that was rather interesting. The fact that the Primus on some level have some allies that we just don't know about. That is very interesting. That gives him control over the infinite timelines, or at least gives him the ability to see into the infinite timelines. But he mentions multiple allies. You don't need multiple allies to do that, right? You just need some allies to do that. Or one at least. You could use one of the dragons of the infinite dragon flight. Or you could use... is it No, it's Aman'Thul has time. So he could side with Aman'Thul, but I believe Aman'Thul made Odin, which would mean Odin would also have that ability if Odin inherited that ability from his father or from his creator. So in that sense, it could very easily be that Odin is the ally that gave him the ability to look into the timelines. I don't know if it's Murozond Apocalypse. The reason being, Murozond is a dragon of the Dragonflight, and what bothers me about the Dragonflight would be that they are just dragons, right? Would they be powerful enough to see or to teach someone how to see every single infinite timeline? I don't know. I mean, they can move between the timelines, but can they see every single one of the timelines in its infinity? This we don't really, I think, have exact answers to. Then again, they did say that Nostormu would eventually go mad, so it could be. I lean towards Odin. I lean towards Odin. It could even be Raden, or it could just be Aman'Thul. They're both Eternal Ones. They're both Titan and Eternal One, so they're on the same wavelength, which means they could effectively be the same friends. Anyways, whichever way it is, whatever this is, this casts even more doubt on what is happening within Maldraxxus, what is happening with the Primus, and how all of this actually will affect the rest of the Shadowlands. There's too much to unpack here. We're going to have... Yeah, I'm going to have to discuss this on Sunday even more, because there's too much to unpack here. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and Alex, good luck, bro. Let me know what you guys think in chat or in the comment section down below.